Hello everyone and welcome to today's tutorial. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a Boeing 737 pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. Today I'm going to show you how to conduct an RNAV approach using LNAV and VNAV modes in the PMDG 737 for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Note that the aircraft you're seeing on screen right now is still work in progress as of right now, so some minor issues might be expected, and PMDG is fully aware of those and working on correcting them. Alright. This set, let's start heading out into the flight deck and start with a little bit of theory as always. So here we are in the captain seat of the 737, currently holding over at waypoint odd to give us a little bit of time to prepare the theory. Now today, I know that many of you have waited for seeing it. We are going to fly to St. Martin. And we'll do the RNAV GNSS approach for runway 10. And this is where things start. Be aware that LPV approaches are not currently certified for the Boeing 737, at least not in my airline. I don't know if other airlines might have approval for LPV approaches. In any case, we do not, so we need either RNAV GNSS or RNAV RMP. Anything that does not include RNAV LPV. Okay, so starting with a little bit of the setup in the FMC here. Descent page setup is really as usual, so is the forecast. Make sure the QNH is entered here. For the fixed rings, once again we're using 10 miles and 4 miles. Or if we were an IMC we would be using 10 miles and 5 miles. So the basic setup is the same as it is for the ILS approach. Now, since we're flying an RNAV approach, we however have to meet some certain limitations. First of them is that the glide path angle in the FMC has to be within 0.1 degree of the glide path angle in the approach plate. So we have 3 degrees here versus 3.04 degrees in here. In the FMC, so that matches up. Regarding the minimums, there are different types of minimums for non-precision approaches. For this one we have an LNAV only minima. That means that vertical guidance is not published, or rather not available in this approach. Of course the airplane can do it using VNAV. However, since it's an LNAV only minima, we have to add 40 feet to our MDA. So 700 foot minima becoming 740 foot minima on the Barrow selector. The reason for that is that you are not allowed to pass the 700 feet. And 40 feet is approximately what the 737 will need when you press the toga button to arrest the descent rate and start climbing again. Therefore, to make sure that we are not going through the 700 feet minima, we are adding 40 feet, so that in case of a go-around, we will be able to climb before reaching the 700. 40 feet is the value that's being used by my operator, and as far as I'm aware, also by many other 737 operators. Something else to be aware of when you are conducting non-precision approaches is, since the vertical guidance is based on your VNAV profile, which is based on the barometric altimeter, you want to be sure that the correct QNH is set. If an incorrect QNH is set, for example 10 hectopascals lower, it means that the airplane is flying about 300 feet lower than it should, and 300 feet on a 3 degree glide path would smash you into the ground 1 mile before the runway. That's called the QNH blunder error, and there is a very good way to mitigate against that in the 737, and that is by using the vertical situation display. We can see it over here on the first officer's ND. You can open it by using the center button on the EFIS control panel and press it twice once from the normal view. If you are already in the rose mode, just press it once again, and then you will get the vertical situation display, provided it is installed in the airplane you are flying. There are aircraft that do not have the VSD, and this option is fully simulated by PMDG. So if you don't have it, just have a look into the FMC options. So if we scroll out far enough, let me zoom in to show you that a bit better. Over here you have that white runway symbol, and that is sitting exactly on the terrain. And if you had a different altimeter setting, then this runway symbol would be above or below the terrain. And that is a very good indication in the 737 to tell you whether you have the correct QNH set. So have a look out on the approach if the runway symbol is actually sitting on the terrain or if it's above or below it. Again, if it's not on the terrain, you want to recheck your altimeter setting with air traffic control. Alright. There is one last thing that I would quickly like to talk about, and that is the availability of integrated approach navigation as an option in the 737. Basically, integrated approach navigation is an option that is going to fake a localizer and a glide slope signal style presentation on your primary flight display, which therefore enables you to use the same procedure for a non-precision approach that you will be using for a precision aka ILS approach. So if you have an airplane that has integrated approach navigation capability, you simply press on the approach button, and then it will show you final approach course and glide path armed versus the standard ILS indications, which would be localizer, so Vorlog and glide slope. There is a small difference there, and that is that integrated approach navigation is basically tracking the white runway center line you have here and the glide path angle that's defined here in the FMC. So that does not take into account any turns that you might have to make on the final approach. If you have an approach where you would, for example, fly direct to Lisor now, or direct to Mapon, and then only join a 2-mile final, and you'd press integrated approach navigation here, it would intercept the 10-mile final. So be aware that using LNAV and VNAV is probably the better option, unless you're really familiar with the way the system works. I am going to do a second video on integrated approach navigation at a later point. However, on this one we are now going to focus on LNAV and VNAV. So with everything being set up, I'm now going to exit the hold, and we'll start our approach into St. Martin. Basically, what you're doing now, you have to verify that LNAV and VNAV are engaged, and 2 miles prior to the final approach fix, now against the Lisor in 1,700 feet, we will set the MCP altitude down all the way to the minimum. So, with 700 feet being the minimum, 740 corrected, we'll set it to 800 feet. Then we verify that VNAV path is engaged, and we press speed intervent to open up the speed window so that we have manual control over our airspeed. When we are passing the final approach fix, we'll then check our altitudes. The difference is a maximum of 75 feet at the final approach fix that we're allowed to accept as a deviation. And laterally, we're going to use the progress page 4 and verify that the approach RMP is set to 0.3, and then our maximum allowable cross-track error is 0.15 nautical miles. We will see this in a moment when we are slowly turning towards the final. So verify the approach RMP is 0.3 for any RNAV approach, unless there is something else specified on the chart. There are approaches which go down all the way to 0.1, so if your chart indicates that, you may have to type it manually into the field over here on the progress page 4. And generally, the progress page 4 is a very good tool for non-precision approaches, because it gives you your vertical deviation and your lateral cross-track error from the approach path. We're now approaching Avaki, flaps 1, and we can descend now to our platform altitude of 1,700 feet. So we're in VNAV path. The airplane is just going to do that all by itself now. Flaps 5. Speed checked. flaps 5. Approaching descent. 800 feet, VNAV path, speed enter vent. Now, when you're flying this, be careful that you are not reaching the MCP selected altitude, otherwise the aircraft is going to level off. So there is a technique here, which is setting the missed approach altitude at the top of the wide bar, so that's 1000 feet above the airfield elevation. But if your minimums is within 300 feet of that wide bar, we are risking an altitude capture, which we don't want. So we're passing Lisor 700 feet, no flags. So then we are risking an altitude capture that we don't want, and therefore what we're going to do, we can set the missed approach altitude once we are at least 300 feet below it. So 4000 feet is the missed approach altitude here, so we can already set it now. And the airplane is going to continue descending. Passing 4 miles, gear down, flap 15. And landing checklist. Start switches, continuous, speed brake, armed, landing gear, down 3 green, holding at flaps. Flaps 30. Flaps 30, green light, landing checks complete. On this very approach, our missed approach point is at Mapen, so latest by Mapen we need to disconnect the autopilot and recycle the flight directors, which I'm going to do now. Because without a runway waypoint in the FMC, remember there was no runway waypoint, we don't have flight director guidance available for our landing. Minimums, continue. If you have a runway waypoint, that's the Romeo Whiskey and then the runway number, then you can keep your flight directors on all the way to the landing, or rather all the way to the flare, because the flight director is going to give you guidance if you have a runway waypoint. But without a runway waypoint, you need to recycle the flight director. Speed brakes up, thrust goes normal. .100 knots passed. 80 knots. 60 knots. Idle reverse, manual brakes. And for the purpose of this tutorial, we are just going to stop on the runway. And here we are. One final word. You might have seen that on final approach I have disregarded the poppies and went into 4 reds. Now that was purely because in Microsoft Flight Simulator the poppy is currently not working very well. In real life, of course, going into 4 reds would be a mandatory go around if it's happening below the landing gate. So for Microsoft Flight Simulator, unfortunately, the poppy isn't very good, so that's why I just had to ignore it. Alright, this is it. This is as easy as an RNAV approach is, using LNAV and VNAV in the Boeing 737 Next Generation and MAX aircraft. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm looking forward to see you all on the next one.